Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Executive Education Design and Delivery in the times of COVID. My name is Tom Cooper. I'm a professor of strategy at the Faculty of Business Administration here at Memorial University. I'm also a facilitator at the Gardner Center. And as my co-author, co-presenter, I have the amazing Jennifer Kelly, who is an instructional designer at the Gardner Center. Today, we're going to talk to you in a number of ways about executive education in the times of COVID. And it's interesting because when I started with this idea and I say, Jennifer, we should really talk about what all the amazing things that the Gardner Center has done in the last year and a bit. I didn't really know much about the executive education literature. I mean, I've lived it, got lots of lived experience, but it's actually kind of a gap in the literature. There isn't much written about this, which is quite interesting. So from an academic standpoint, this is both has both practical and academic purposes as well. So I'm really excited to speak to you all today. So what is executive education? We got some great feedback in terms of the idea for the presentation, so we'll start off from there. Executive education is really, really important for ensuring relevance, especially university business schools. Now, it's important to recognize that within Memorial University, you probably don't know, but there's a lot of executive education going on. For example, in the Faculty of Medicine, Engineering, etc., there's pockets of it. But the Gardner Center, which Jennifer will explain to you in a bit, is kind of, in a number of ways, kind of the lead. And that's because of the importance within university business schools of executive education. So we were asked to define what executive education is, and executive education can be defined as education that takes place post-graduation, that is offered by and through universities with the focus on, sorry, the words got cut off there, but with the focus on skills, knowledge, not theory, but in a number of ways in terms of with a focus on self and sometimes organizational development. The interesting thing is that pre-pandemic, many universities were increasing the use of online executive education to facilitate student and instructor flexibility. Up until, I would say, maybe about 5-6 years ago, it would kind of be a very foreign concept to have online executive education. There were some institutions doing it, but for the most part, and I've been involved or participating in executive education for probably close to 22 years. It wasn't something that you would do. Like kind of the traditional model is, let's go to a nice hotel, we'll bring in a great guest speaker, we'll do some team bonding, we'll talk about these kind of bigger issues. We all have a nice meal, maybe a couple drinks, repeat the next day, and then go home. You know, that was kind of the model. Now the Gardner Center can't do that, but that's not their traditional model, which Jennifer will explain. But in a number of ways, this has not been the world of online delivery because you're paying for the experience. And that becomes really important. So 20 years ago, education for executives was primarily people like me, professors, coming in and doing specialized training and maybe doing kind of an executive summary of a course that I did. And basically, when I started working with the Gardner Center 15 years ago, that's what I started doing. I would be doing ethics and values in the public sector leadership program, or I'd be doing a program on strategy and risk, which I do for my MBA students. But it was very much kind of focused on kind of summarize some of the latest theory and techniques. And it was largely kind of case study and listening to me get up and wax eloquently and or not in classroom lectures by notable academics. And if you look at the history of the Gardner Center, that's traditionally been how executive training has been done. The training content then was predominantly decided by people like me, who, for better or for worse, may have specific views on subjects such as strategy and foundational skills, such as finance or marketing. As academics, we have lots of different hats. You know, we're teachers, we're researchers, we're involved in service, we're involved in engagement activities, etc. But in terms of really understanding the notion of training and how training should actually go on, it's not something that many of us are experts on. And that's why we rely on people like Jennifer, but a lot of times it's more consultative rather than being led by. And moreover, it's interesting to see that many of the programs that, not just at Gardner, but at places like Rotman and Soder, and to some of the bigger trends that are going on, were essentially up until kind of the pre-pandemic, kind of abridged MBAs. And for the attending executive, the experience was seen as both a reward and as a preparation for their promotion to senior levels. So before I came back into academia, I spent 7 years with PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big global consultancies. And executive training was, that was your reward. You did a good job. Yeah, we're going to put you on this course. You know, we think you could go to this level, or you should be working on this. We're going to put you on this course. And so it was a number of ways it was seen as an experience. And it was as much about going to the place and meeting the people as it was about the content that was going on. So it was a very kind of different approach from there. But what happened last year? Pandemic. So we had to move to remote delivery. And up until that point, you could see the technology slowly creeping up, where especially kind of in traditional MBA, so business schools are super competitive because they're kind of the cash cows of a lot of universities. And what they were trying to do is overcoming barriers around time and location. Online was seen as a potential delivery mechanism, but it wasn't becoming mainstream. But in-class delivery approaches were very much the primary method of delivery. And if you ever, after this pandemic is over, I encourage you to go down to see the amazing location that the Gardner Center has at the Signal Hill campus. It is beautiful. It's stunning. Our last picture is of looking outside the window. And the reason for that location is that you're paying to go there. If you're a local company or your national company or in the public, private, or not-for-profit sector, you're writing a check for one of your staff members or yourself to go down and to get that executive training. So it's a premium price product. So the premium is reflected in the location. And moreover, if you go to places like the University of Western Ontario's Ivy School or Rotman's, the premium, they charge a lot more, and they have much better cappuccinos. No offense to the Gardner Center, but they have really nice cappuccinos and really good biscuits. And ultimately, because you got to reflect, if you're charging someone, Gardner Center doesn't do this, but $5,000 a day to go to a course, you want to make sure that everything's really nice, like linen handkerchiefs, like the whole thing. So executive education was a premium price product, and there was an expectation of a premium service. But the pandemic meant that online executive delivery was a primary, if not the only delivery approach. But yet in the academic literature, Wolverton, for example, in 2018 describes that while student engagement can be really difficult to achieve in traditional classroom settings, the distant learning context inherently impedes student engagement and provides unique obstacles to the desired outcome of student engagement. So this is where I think executive education really kinds of, how do you make sure that the people walk out are engaged? How do you make sure that they can recognize the value of the day that they got? Because if they don't, they're going to complain. If they don't, they're not going to come back. If they don't, they're going to tell their colleagues and other people in the industry, don't go to the Gardner Center, don't go to Soder, don't go to Rotman, don't go to any of those sort of things. So in a number of ways is, how do you maintain that element of premiumization, which is a big kind of global trend these days? And how can we overcome this notion of everybody's on Zoom? How do we, so what's the real difference between going to Gardner Center and going on to LinkedIn Learning or going on to some other sort of model? So how can we overcome this in executive education? And this is what we're going to talk about how the Gardner Center was able to overcome this. Over to my amazing colleague, Jennifer, who will just tell me when to switch slides from now on.
Thank you, Tom. And I just want to say thank you to Tom for having me today. It's quite an honor to be co-presenting, and it's wonderful to be with you all here today. So I want to begin by touching on a few things that Tom mentioned that I think is relevant to what I'm about to speak to myself. And that's about how in executive education, it's really about creating an experience. And Gardner Center is and was masterful at creating this in-class experience. Participants are treated well. Our staff is one of the best in terms of customer service. We care about our clients, and it shows in our actions and our communication. And then boom, you couldn't come to Signal Hill campus anymore, and we were on Zoom. So one of the challenges for us was, how do we still create a premium experience but online? So already it sounds daunting, and it was in the beginning, but that's what I'm going to speak with you about here and show you specifically what we focused on to create that experience. Go ahead, Tom. So let me tell you a little bit about Gardner Center for those of you who may not be familiar with the center. We are the outreach arm of the Faculty of Business Administration, and we are award winning, and we unite industry, subject matter experts, and business all together in learning. We offer non-credit courses and certificate programs, and they're offered year-round. So we have a wide range of courses and programs in open enrollment. We offer custom training opportunities, and we have numerous cohort programs. All of our courses and programs are facilitated by a network of experts, such as Tom and other stakeholders from business and the university, practitioners, academic instructors. Gardner Center unites them all in the quest for professional and personal growth in our clients and participants. Really, our goal is to achieve business excellence in the changing business world and landscape. But since moving to the virtual instructor-led training environment, our goals have expanded. And really, our goals now are around achieving business excellence while also helping, again, that personal and professional growth of the client. So our goal has expanded. So what started out as a challenge has actually ended as a huge opportunity for us in terms of what we offer and give back to our clients. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we offer a wide range of engaging programs and courses, and they're developed in conjunction with people like myself, who is an instructional designer, also known as a curriculum developer, and also our subject matter experts build their own courses. And we have so many topics. And again, because we are now in a different environment, we're actually offering new and varied topics that we wouldn't have been offering a year ago. So we have leadership, we have personal wellness, business excellence. We've really expanded our offerings, which again, both Tom and I will touch on as we go through. And ultimately, as Tom mentioned, the model for executive education has really evolved from this sort of static, stand and deliver type of model to really pairing practical experiential learning with practical theories and learning models. And Gardner Center really strives to bridge those two worlds to create an experience. So I'm going to ask you to remember that word experience, because I'm going to go back to that a lot and how we recreated our original experience of in-class. So some key strategies for instructional design with Gardner Center. So after everything, the pandemic, of course, affected everything globally, and we were only offering in-class training. So we moved all of our training to a remote delivery environment. And since last year, there's actually only been one course held in person in class, and that was because we only had 8. So everything else, all our programs and courses are now online using Zoom. Because of this huge transformation, we decided to take the opportunity to really evaluate how we were constructing and delivering and building our courses. So there began a sort of deeper interactions between instructors, subject matter experts, and myself to really focus on standardization in curriculum and instructional design standards. We also experimented a lot with timing. Originally, we started off offering full day training online, quickly realized that participants become quite fatigued by that model. And now we are reverting to more micro learning, which is short chunks of learning in a short amount of time. So we often just do 3.5-hour sessions, half day, and our programs are the only training that we do that's offered over a full day. And one of the new things that we adopted, and Tom does this, I have to say, so well amongst all our instructors, is a 360 learning approach. So essentially, that's just a really great word for blended learning. So now we have instructors preparing content and material that participants will review before they log into their online Zoom virtual instructor-led training. And there's material that they'll review post virtual instructor-led training. So this 360 model brings all facets of training together. There's things they do outside of the Zoom classrooms, there are things that they do afterwards, and we never did that before. So that's been really exciting for us. And I mentioned standardization and I mentioned the word experience, and I asked you to keep that in your mind because for us, the experience starts and ends with participant engagement or student or learner engagement. I'll use those terms interchangeably. And in order to create that experience, we really had to start with the curriculum. The curriculum is the foundation of everything that you see being delivered. And creating that learning experience had to begin with the design of the courses, and that's something we've really striven to improve over the past year. We also added unique elements to appeal to another training need that we saw emerging in the market, and that was around personal wellness. So when we first started out offering virtual instructor-led training, it was actually just in the form of wellness. So it was actually run by myself, who does work in positive psychology, and some people would join me online and we would do a wellness break. That's how it started. And eventually we started weaving it into curriculum. So we now have yoga breaks, other facilitators and experts in this field come on and walk participants through stretching and yoga. We have mini breaks or micro breaks. So on the hour, we give participants 5 minutes to get some water. We actually recommend healthy practices like going outside for some fresh air, getting up and stretching. So again, that was a lens we had not taken before. So that's new for us. So how do we create that standardization that I've talked about so much? I've mentioned several times now that creating this experience for participants / students / learners really starts with design. Everything that we want to see in the virtual instructor-led training environment or in class starts with good design. So some of the practices that we've implemented are we now have activity workbooks that are part of every curriculum material. So participants receive a workbook that they can actually work within live on their own computers during the training, or they can still print if they wish. We offer design map examples to our instructors now, which gives them an outline or what I call a map for them to follow as they design their course. And again, it includes checklists around standardization from the type of visuals they should use to offering the right mix of activities. So we've offered that now for instructors. We have made more of an effort to use universal design principles. So that's design that appeals to a wide range of learners and audiences, regardless of culture, race, or background. I mentioned the wellness breaks already, so I won't touch on that. We also built numerous guidebooks and best practices for our instructors. So we have videos. I just uploaded a video yesterday inspired by Tom's video on inclusive learning practices. I just posted a video yesterday on basically a year in review. What are my best tips for engagement? So we are so committed to equipping instructors with the tools they need to create that learning experience at Gardner. And I would like to share with you our 4 pillars of engagement that everything I just talked about stems from. So pillar 1 is we create the journey for learners, participants, students. That begins with design, as I mentioned. We start mapping that in the design of the course. So long before the instructor logs on to the meeting or shows up in class. We create a community. I can't stress enough how important it is to create and focus on personalization in online learning, making participants feel like they are in a learning community, they're on a journey. We use these words all the time. This is a learning experience. It's personalized to them. So that helps us mimic that in-class executive experience that we previously had, and of course will have again when we go to a more blended model in the future. The third is to create high impact engagement. What do I mean by that? Well, we're constantly engaging and we're training and encouraging other instructors to do the same. So we may be lecturing sometimes, but we're always weaving it in to the Zoom tools. So as a really quick example, as I relay a piece of content, I will then use the annotate tool, or I'll ask participants to weigh in on what they think using the stamp tool. We constantly have participants interacting with the material, and that's what creates what I call the high impact engagement. And finally, number 4, and this is where Tom so excels. I have to say again, he's one of the best. The 360 learning experience. So having participants do work before and after the live delivery. All of this builds that sense of this isn't a course or training. This is an enriching experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Commander Jennifer. Sorry, we have an inside joke on that. So one of the things that when Jennifer and I were designing this, I said, well, let's take it from your perspective as a curriculum developer, instructional designer. And I'm going to just talk about what it means from an instructor standpoint. Now, the cool thing about being an instructor at the Gardner Center is I always say it's like my petri dish for trying out different things for when I go back to teaching my undergraduates or my MBA students. A lot of the things that I've learned how to do in the Gardner Center in terms of 360 engagement, etc. Just because I was able to bring in different formats, and then ultimately sometimes even inform what I was doing for the Gardner Center. And to be honest, I got promoted last year. Hooray for me! And I got promoted to full professor on teaching. And if it wasn't for the Gardner Center, that would have been it, because ultimately getting constant feedback, because every day when you get out of there, you get feedback from the participants about what worked and didn't work, is an amazing learning experience for being an instructor. And you're being assessed in normally positive, I'd say 85% of the time. Sometimes you get people don't like you, but you live with that and you kind of move on. But I think in a number of ways, for me, the move to remote, which Jennifer outlined, was a big shift for Gardner Center, because it moved from a really crappy place in the Faculty of Business Administration, which if you go, they've spent a lot of money recently, but it was falling apart. And then they moved to this outstanding 5-star location in the Signal Hill campus. And so there was a real kind of focus on place, physical place, rather than necessarily the content. So nobody would ever kind of, if I did a bad job, they would kind of question my content or, what I was doing. But, for the most part, if you're doing an okay job, you're doing an okay job. Everyone was happy with it. And people would look outside the window and say, wow, isn't this lovely? And that was always the mitigating approach. But remote meant that we had to change that as instructors. So the first thing was kind of flexing your learning preference. And by that is, if you were one of those people who, like to talk for hours and hours, can't do that in a remote environment. You can't do that in executive education, probably at the best of times. But sometimes you can get away with it because you're funny, or you can tell some jokes, or just the way you've been doing it. But you had to flex your learning preference. And you needed to be flexible in your preferred style of learning and teaching. And to be honest, we probably lost a small number of instructors along the way who haven't been able to adapt. But that flexibility meant that in a number of ways, if things aren't going well, you have to have the proverbial tickle trunk and figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? And remote's main means ultimately, both as instructors and facilitators and professors and people who are interested in teaching and learning, is that means that the way we learn and teach will change, both positive and negative. Having taught in the spring of 2020, the fall of 2020 at the university, and continuing teaching throughout the Gardner Center throughout that whole time period, including winter 2021. For me, it's been an amazing learning experience around how I actually teach. But there's positive and negative. I miss seeing students in class. I miss looking at body language. I miss them to get that kind of verbal feedback that you would get when you know that, yeah, it's time to take a break. And now in a number of ways, now you say, okay, well, I've been speaking for longer than 15 minutes. I got to stop and get them to do an activity, and they've been sitting in their desk for an hour or 50 minutes, time for them to move on. And ultimately that ties into the literature when we look at what executive education is, which is that of the process and that of the content. So the pedagogies that we see in executive education concern emotion, engagement, and inquiry, in addition to the stuff, whether it's strategy, risk management, or leadership, or conflict management, etc., that we traditionally teach in business schools. So executive education programs are said to deal with the knowledge, skills, and perception and development of business leadership. And giving them that experiential process, whether it's in case studies or activities or scenarios or whatever works, to be honest. And then and sometimes you have to try stuff out and figure out if it's going to work or not going to work. That's what you're really focusing on. As Jennifer said, it's about the experience. It's not necessarily about who has the best content. To be honest, I don't have the best content. But how do I take that process and that content and marry those together to really try and give the best experience for the students in that, and learners and people who pay money. That's always I go back to about executive education, who are there. So the other key thing, which I think remote learning has really brought to me, is that it's amazing some of the people that we have in the classes now that we didn't have in the past. We talked, Kellyanne's plenary talk at lunchtime. We're getting Indigenous people coming in from Nawashish and Shashi and other communities across who weren't there before because distance has been overcome. We're getting some really interesting participants from different organizations that once again can come to the Gardner Center because things can be delivered now. So that means that in an executive education standpoint, we also need to deal with economic, social, cultural, technological, and political environments as business that may not just be the local Newfoundland Labrador context, which up until this point, I would say probably 95%, and still a very, very high percentage of who the participants were. We also have to think about the ethical concerns of management and arguably the broader stakeholder community that we're trying to serve. And in this respect, what I think the literature shows, and this has come, Pfeffer and Fong in 2004 talked about, conventional management education is very much focused more on learning how to learn rather than being content driven. And I think that's where what executive education that the Gardner Center provides is this focus on how to learn to be a leader, how to learn to be someone who's dealing with change management, how to learn to deal with leadership or conflict management, rather than saying, here's a bunch of stuff, which in a book, anybody can get books these days, and or you can go online to like amazing programs like Masterclass or LinkedIn Learning, etc. But they're just giving you content. They're not helping you focus on how you can actually learn. So that means for instructors and like myself is that you need to adapt your content, the learning environment to your students. I find I spend way more time summarizing and reflecting and having students summarize and reflect than what they've done in the past. That's been a real kind of key learning point for me. And I started that at the Gardner Center, and now that I've translated that down to my MBAs and my undergraduate students as well. Timing is so different. I feel, man, do I get bad Zoom fatigue or WebEx fatigue. After 7 hours, I feel like I've been running a marathon. Last couple of weeks ago, I had 2 days in a row where I was doing 7 hours. Like I was punch drunk. It felt like I couldn't talk at the end. Like my wife's looking at me going, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm going, "I just spent 2 days online." And I had students last week who had 5 days in a row. That's hard, but that's the nature of these programs, and their employers want them to there because they want them to be promoted. They're rewarding them with this 5 days of training, or there's 3 days of training, or there's 2 days of training. So you need to be flexible. You need to say that, yeah, I got some important points going, but they really need a break, and so I almost have a rule now, which I call the 20-20-10-5 rule, which is 20 minutes of me talking is maximum. Get there, do an activity for 20, have them debrief for 10, or if not longer, if it's going well. But at the end of it, you're giving them 5. So no longer of me talking, and I can talk as we can see. But once again, timing is so important. And ultimately, good teachers and instructors, as we've seen with what the Gardner Center has been able to do over the last year, adapt and modify their approach based on learning, research, and good practice. And I think that's, for me as an instructor, that was the key thing. The Gardner Center has always been really good in terms of providing good practice and thinking about things, etc. It's just taking it to the next level over the last year. It's kind of like on steroids, maybe is a better way to describe it. And that's in executive education and in undergraduate education and in graduate school education, is how we try and modify our learning, research, and good practice around which some of it doesn't exist because we've been experiencing this for the last year. So Jennifer and I are going to do both of this together and so we're going to talk a little bit about the future of executive education, because this is a big deal. I know it's, a lot of us are not, some of us probably got at least done a course, but this is important for the university in terms of meeting its mission and mandate and all those sort of things as well. So Jennifer and I we're both agreeing that whether you want to call it 360, whether you want to call it hybrid, we see that future executive education students don't really care about how it's delivered. They want whatever it's going to be online is going to deliver equal value, whether you attend online or in person. And it's interesting, one of the premier programs which the Gardner Center delivers is the Director's Education Program, which is offered by the Rotman School of Business as part of the University of Toronto. People paid a lot of money to do that course, and that's all gone online. And I'm one of the facilitators on that as well. And I was teaching in Toronto while the class was a Toronto cohort. And it's interesting in terms of the value, the feedback was, this is really, really valuable. They missed the networking, which is incredibly important for that level of executive. They want to meet people from different sectors, et cetera. But in terms of the feedback that I've gotten in terms of teaching that, is that as long as the content and the practices and deliveries are, they don't care if it's in person. And for a lot of them, actually, even who are not maybe as concerned about the networking, it's invaluable. Jennifer, I'm going to get you to do the next one, the more, not less. You've already kind of alluded to that, but off you go.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, it's when Tom is speaking about the changes we've made, and these changes are reflecting, I guess, other practices and movement in education. For example, the blended learning, the personalized learning, the experiential focus. Participants and students, they want to know, like, what am I going to be able to do with this content? How am I going to be able to put this in action in my job? But there's also a need for a personal development aspect as well, and that's where Gardner Center has expanded its offerings. So we still have these, what we consider to be national leading programs. Like Tom mentioned one, we have others that are historic, really. Our supervisory management skills program, for example. But we are trying to add more to appeal to other types of audiences that are not just existing now, but they want training. They want to see offerings in this area. So for example, we now offer webinars. We would not have done that a year ago, or even we just wouldn't have, because we were sticking to kind of one market and looking to create one experience. Now we've expanded it. So our very first webinar, it was in resilience. It was in a wellness-based topic. Our next upcoming webinar is in unconscious bias. So in that way that we are broadening our spectrum, we're including new topics, and with new topics come new audiences. And with new audiences come new and different training needs that we want to meet. And we're about to launch tomorrow an introduction to our brand new program, which is in personal leadership. So even in our offerings in, say, our main topics like leadership, we're expanding those past something that we wouldn't have probably a year ago.
I think another key thing is going to be the notion around strategic learning partnerships. Um, this is not only the Gardner Center, but corporations and other organizations, both in the not-for-profit sector, public sector, private sector, are looking to business schools and outreach arms like the Gardner Center for help developing custom online degrees for their employees. Um, even locally, I was going to say one of the biggest online delivery um, programs in the world is the Syed School of Business at the University of Oxford. And a local company, I'm not going to say who they are, but you can find them on LinkedIn because they were promoting it yesterday, is sending 8 of their employees on this very expensive course that I'm sure the Gardner Center could have done. But there's the brand of the University of Oxford, all that sort of thing. But if you're going to spend that amount of money, and that's an expensive proposition to go, both not only in terms of the check that you write, but the people's time. If you're sending 8 of your executives out to a course, which is something the Gardner and the course that they're doing is not something the Gardner Center offers right now. But those strategic learning partnerships are going to be really important. And a lot of that's been implicit already within the Gardner Center. Like, they have had some really, really good long-standing clients that and have been providing learners and participants for the last 14 years. Um, am I allowed to at least name one, Jennifer? What do you think? Would I get in trouble? Is that confidential? No. Like Provincial Airways, my God. I mean, like I've taught so many people from Provincial Airlines, such a great organization. They've participated pretty much in everything. They're really kind of knowledge-based learning organization. So phenomenal. So it's all kudos to them. Sorry if I wasn't allowed to say that. But anyway, but still, they participate in the full spectrum of the course that the Gardner Center offers. But I think one of the other futures, you're going to see more customized, more specific organizational focused training as well. I'll do the other two and then let Jennifer come in and give her prices. Pricing is important. Sorry, this is business school professor, and I'm okay talking about money and stuff like that, but you need to be competitive and appropriate. It's difficult, if not impossible, to compete against the mass offerings like LinkedIn Learning or Masterclass. Um, Masterclass, you get $250 for a year, and you get something like 78 courses that you can take, like with full Hollywood level production. But there are just some people speaking to you. Now it's in nice chunks and it's all the good things that we talked to, but it's not learning, it's content, right? And you have to, so the content is there, and that's why I think the process and importance of learning is really, really important. So you need to be competitively and appropriate priced, especially given remote delivery. This is going to be, I think, a challenge for organizations like the Gardner Center and for other executive education. How do you appropriately price? Where is the value proposition? And the value proposition, a lot of times, is in the certificates and the diplomas. They matter. Like people want those. They want to put them on their walls. They want to put them on their resumes because this is continuing education. And just like we go to university to not only become better people and to learn and get our BAs or BComs or MBAs or MSCs or Masters of Humanities, etc., that skill-based certification and credentialing is valuable. And the Gardner Center has to make sure, and this is what they've done over the last year, is that the brand doesn't diminish because it's being done remotely. And because those skills-based certification and credentialing is so important. Jennifer, any comments on that?
Yes, so we are very much aware of that. That's actually been one of the highlights of our, what I like to call our kind of our client-focused relationship and service delivery. We will literally package up beautiful certificates and really nice frames, because we know that it matters to people to have these certificates, and we want them to be proud of it, and we want them to showcase that. So we're actually currently now negotiating with the university to offer digital badges, because that has become a movement or a trend we're seeing in education. So that's like the virtual certificate. It's a stamp that says you've completed skill-based learning. So that's an area that we're really actively working on. So digital badging to let participants be able to showcase on LinkedIn, etc., that, hey, I have these skills, and guess where I got them? At the Gardner Center. But why do they go to the Gardner Center? Because we want to be offering an experience. And this all traces back to the pedagogy that Tom mentioned earlier. It's really about meaning making with the content. It's really about interacting with the content, engaging with peers, engaging with the instructor, seeing the instructor as a community member instead of a lecturer. The instructor is part of the learning community. They're a guide, helping participants explore on this journey of learning and skill-based education. And that's really what we've been striving so hard to do in the virtual instructor-led training environment. How do we compete with, masterclass and LinkedIn Learning? Well, our value add is exactly what Tom said. It's the value of trainers and instructors who care about participant outcomes, where participant learning matters to them, where engagement keeps them up at night. That's the type of culture we have at Gardner Center, and it's one we want to keep building and promoting. So we are participant and learner focused.
And on that great summary, this is a view from the Gardner Center about 2 years ago. Kind of could be today. Well, actually, no, they got snow. But thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Dante, we're happy to answer any questions.
I think Shane raised his hand. Shane?
I did, thank you. One question that I had is, I'm interested to know, I guess, the differences in terms of how the curriculum is built for these types of courses and trainings and certificate programs relative to, like, say, a 4-credit university course, like in terms of like what pedagogies are used, like, is there, like, how similar is it to, say, typical methods like Kolb's learning cycle and scaffolding, like what that process is put into the development of these courses, like exactly that's different from a 4-credit university course?
Jennifer, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So that's a fantastic question. I mean, the first obvious difference to me is that, of course, they're condensed, so they're much shorter. They only span really a day at the most, 2 days of training in one course, so they're condensed. And because of that condensed nature, we have really shifted the design to include various learning models. So we know that in typical learning pedagogy, there will be reflection, there will be cognitive learning activities where there's reflection and peer learning, and then there's experiential, and then there's a blend. So we have really tried to elevate the amount of skills-based experiential and the amount of peer learning and reflection. So we've shifted away from this sort of stand and deliver lecture type cognitive, really cognitive heavy learning model to a more skills-based experiential, working with peers to learn, using self-assessment, self-reflection. That's another learning model we're using more and more. So the sort of quick answer is that the entire course design is really focused on application. So there's, like Tom and his 20-20-30 formula, there's a piece of content, there's immediately an application, then there's a reflection, and then there's a cognitive break or an overall summary is provided. And then we start the formula over again. So we do it in a shorter duration of time, and we mix up the learning models, cognitive, reflection, peer, experiential. We're constantly mixing them to keep the engagement high and assigning the most priority to that skill-based. They see a bit of content, it's practiced immediately. So it's here it is, and then there's a how-to.
Yeah, great point, Jennifer. Shane, like as someone who develops both, the learning objectives are not too different than when you're starting off designing a course with the Gardner Center than you would do within a university, like within a university for credit. So we look at kind of Bloom's taxonomy in the domain. There'd be comprehension, knowledge, application, evaluation, synthesis, analysis, all those sort of things will go in place. I think the big difference is that we don't test people at the end of the day, right? You know, I think that's really important. So you're not sitting down doing a multiple choice test at the end of the day or writing an essay or anything. And even if there is kind of an evaluation reflection kind of summary, for example, like we do with the advanced leadership program, and to a lesser extent with the mastering business essentials program, they're just more in terms of constructive feedback is given. You don't get an A or B or C. But in terms of the kind of good practice and best practice, that's kind of reflected not only in terms of what's going on within the Gardner Center, but also people like Jennifer and Valerie and Melissa are going to these national conferences where they can see what other institutions are doing and how they're approaching in terms of leading it as well. And moreover, we get, unlike university students, we get feedback saying, this is crap, we don't like this, you know, and you got to change things around because people talk and people go to other sessions and there's all kinds of this continual sort of feedback as well. Did that answer your question, Shane, or did we skirt around it too much so that you didn't get anything?
No, it's good. I found it really interesting. Thank you for the answer, folks.
Brent, thank you for asking the question. Any more questions? You know, in a number of ways, I think executive education, I think is important for professional schools. I think this is, in a number of ways, is kind of like the canary in the coal mine, right? You know, I think that's because it's almost a virtuous circle. What we're doing now is come so far in 10, 15 years. And moreover, I think what that gets reflected back in terms of student expectations at an undergraduate level and a graduate level, because their parents are doing these courses, you know, and their parents are feeding back to the students going, why are you doing that? Like, why are you doing multiple choice tests? Sorry, no offense to multiple choice tests. It's a good evaluation mechanism for a number of different elements, but like, why is someone lecturing to you for 40 minutes? Aren't you doing case studies? Aren't you doing this? Aren't you doing that? And it's interesting with professional schools is that if you're, especially for places which have really, really high tuition, so like relative to other, like the University of Western Ontario, Ivy School of Business, if you're a business student, you're paying 5 to 6 times more than you would be doing your BA in sociology, for example. But that premiumization is reflected in terms of, you know, you're expecting to get something, right? You know, you're expected to do not only to get the latest theory or the latest, this is what the Journal of Business Ethics said, or this is how it pulls in, but they expect all those kind of things that's going on in executive education design and delivery. So it's an interesting kind of virtuous circle. Jennifer.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Tom is saying. There's a phrase that I do a lot of work in like competency mapping and developing performance indicators and criteria. And one of those things I've tried to infuse in the design of Gardner Center courses when I interact and consult and partner with other instructors is we want to build the course around ultimately what do we want the learner to be able to know and do. Like that has to be the focus and the road to getting there. So them developing that sense with what do they need to ultimately know and do after the one-day training is done. Then we focus on knowledge transfer. So it's not a knowledge dump, it's about knowledge transfer. How can we get them to transfer this knowledge into a performance or a behavioral indicator? And that all starts with good design. And then when we're in the virtual instructor-led training environment, we're using, like I said earlier, in response to Shane, a mix of learning models. So in university, you will see some courses exactly as Tom described, where there's just kind of a stand and deliver a lecture and some just some sort of summative assessments. In professional development, we're always looking for that mix. We're using all learning models together at one time. So there's pair learning, and then the next activity might be a case scenario. The next might be Tom just reflecting with his community. So we're constantly varying it and using all models together.
Cool. Anything else? Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the awesome Commander Kelly. Calvin, thank you. Dante, thank you. Any more questions, problems, issues, concerns? Not hearing anything. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I'm on tomorrow talking about TED Talks. So that'll also equally be. I'll have nice slides at least.
Riveting.
Scenario. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.